got 40 minutes, so I'm gonna dive into it.
Okay, cool.
I have some things I've written about you, so I'm gonna ask you some questions. But
All right.
first of all, just to introduce everyone who ends up watching this, if they aren't already familiar with you, you are the author of Animals Eat Each Other, Nudes, Gag Reflex, and most recently, Deliver Me, out now through Unnamed Press. I have some more things to say about Deliver Me in a minute. You also founded Witchcraft Magazine. You're kind of a prolific editor. I've seen your name on the inside of a number of indie lit books the past few years. You have a Patreon, you do workshops, manuscript consultations, etc. From my vantage point, it seems like you have this amazing hustle, which I very much admire. But I want to talk a bit about your books. So, prior to Deliver Me, I'd purchased and read two of your titles, Animals Eat Each Other and your collection of short stories called Nudes. They're both rooted in a contemporary American vision of sex and subculture, and both contain a very gripping style. And I think I was also drawn to the visual presentation of each book, particularly Nudes, with the red cover and pistol on the front and the photo of you holding a rifle. It's got this kind of like cleaned up new metal aesthetic, if you will. It all feels like very cohesive to me. But then you dropped Deliver Me, another book rooted in the American rural South, a novel that seems both an obvious and surprising progression of your work. I didn't end up reading this until pretty late in 2023, but it's become one of my favorite books of the past few years. And it's dark, disgusting at times, full of these rich characters. The weird sex stuff involving insects is quite compelling. And it's also something I could see being adapted into a film or prestige TV show. Yet I've seen in recent interviews that you've joked about having set out to write Deliver Me as your basic bitch novel. So I was hoping you could just tell me about the book and what you mean by that, by this basic bitch statement.
Yeah, so I guess it was like, I guess to describe the novel, I don't even know how to describe the novel now. It's really about a mother who wants nothing more than to be a mother. And I just like, I think it was an aesthetic coalescing of just having lived in Northwest Arkansas and how meaningful it was to me. Like I'd grown up in the South in Georgia when I was little, but then my like dad retired from the military and we moved away. And moving back, I moved back specifically because like living where I was living, it was too expensive. I just couldn't afford it. And there's just something about like small towns and stuff that I love. And so I guess it was almost a way of like trying to capture like what I loved about the environment in terms of like the nature and all of that, but also like filtering it through all these other things that I obsessively couldn't stop thinking about, you know? And yeah, for my basic bitch novel, so like right after I had my baby, she was like 9 months old. She's like 6 now. I just felt like I could not access this part of my brain that I used to be able to access. And it was really frustrating. And every time I tried to get like further in this other novel that I was trying to write, I just like got stuck. Like, and I rewrote it a couple of times, several times. And I'd like send it to like a former mentor to like ask their thoughts. And they were like, this just doesn't feel as like darkly intellectual as I know you can be. And of course I was like, oh, of course, it's confirming everything that I feel about myself right now. And so I was like, you know what I'm going to do is like, I'm just going to teach myself like the basics of plot, like these foundations that like I never really dove into other than just what we intuitively know about storytelling. And I'm
Sure.
going to write this like basic plot and like just try to figure out how I do this. I think like when writers come to things like 90 Day Novel or like what are some other big ones? There's like Story Grid or all of these like tools people use and like how to write a book. They're ultimately, I think, kind of looking for that shortcut. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
how do I
yeah.
get through this difficult part? Um, and I think I was trying to do that, but like look for the shortcut. But like as my as the experience of like writing went on, and even as I like start other books, I realized that it's it's always, no matter what, a fundamentally like spiritual and intense process. It's never easy. It's difficult every single time. Um, but like, yeah, I'm happy now at the end of it, looking at it and being like, okay, maybe it's like not my basic bitch novel. Like it feels like me rather than something that's like paint by numbers. Does that make
Oh
sense?
yeah. Like I don't think it is. I think, I mean, it's not a basic novel. It may be structurally cohesive, and maybe that's like an, but I think that's a positive thing. And honestly, when I look at the sort of like indie literature scene, a lot of people seem to be like plot doesn't matter to me. It's all about style. And I kind of subscribe to the style above everything. At the same time, it's you probably should know how to do that, even if it's not something you want to go after. And to some extent, maybe you're more dialed into that than me. I don't know. Like I haven't read that book, the 90-day novel or whatever. But I thought it was interesting. Like, did you come to that conclusion to maybe delve into that by reading some of those like early Otessa Moshfegh interviews? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like when I saw that, I was like, all right, I'm gonna read this and figure it out. And you know what though? I love the idea of writing a novel in 90 days. Like I know that it's doable, but I hated that book. I hated the prompts. I hated like the exercises that they told you to do every day. I didn't like any of that stuff. I simply like the idea of like setting myself a goal of being like, all right, we'll just like write 80,000 words, in 12 weeks. I liked that process, like that itself is cool. And I've doing that, I was like, oh, I know that now it's like possible for me. But yeah, no, I know. I do feel like I am on the camp of like style over everything because style is like it's so, thinking about style and linguistics is so important. I don't like books that just have like these A to B sentences.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like even a plotless novel is a plot because I feel like a plot is simply the character moving us through their mind and their actions. Like, I just think that that's what plot is, I just think that there's different forms that it can take, like I've like changed my mind on this idea of being like a plot is formulaic. I actually am just like, no, I think like plot just means like, you know, like how are we moving? Like, how's the character moving us through their world? I don't know.
Well, I'm
So,
curious, do you think that going through that process of like the really structured, at least initial part of writing this was helpful even in the sense that like I've read, two of your other books and like I liked them. It's not like I thought they sucked or something, but this book it feels like a little bit of like an elevation to a next thing, but it also feels like more fucked up in a lot of ways. Like all the things that people would be into, I feel like on an indie underground press type of thing, like you hit all of those points in a pretty intense way. And I think looking at people's reaction to this book, I mean, I don't know. I'm not you, so I haven't seen like all the shit you got from previous books, and maybe it was better. But from my vantage point, it seems like people like really connect to Deliver Me, and certainly I do. I mean, I've seen all these people saying that it's more or less like a horror novel, which I don't think on the face is true, but just some of the stuff about your character and the chicken factory, and certainly some of like the psychological and physical violence gets to a pretty gnarly place. So I don't know. Do you think having a structure in place like that allows you to be more experimental, or I don't know what a better word for that is, but go to those places that I think maybe you were trying to with the previous work?
that's a good question. Like, I think every book project I'm trying for something different in a way. Like, um, overall, I think I actually don't even know why I write. I don't know even why I started that sentence. I'm like,
Okay,
but
fair
I
enough.
think like, but I do think like, each book is like a different like aspect of something that I'm just like examining and looking at and like obsessed with in some ways. But so it's like with Deliver Me, that just happened to be like this turn, towards like the violent and stuff just was like I'm thinking about this more in this like different way and like really examining like the psychology of killing, which I still think about like all the time and like all that. Um but like, I do feel like creating the structure for myself did help me when I got to a point where I was like, I feel stuck. Because one of the things that I was experiencing in the failed novel that I didn't revive was that I would like get halfway through and then I was like, I don't know where I'm going. Like I can't just like push through this what feels like this inertia at this point. Like I don't know how to get out of my stagnation and I also don't know why. Like I just didn't have like a blueprint or a map that I had made for myself. I was kind of going on feel. And I think some people can do that, and they're like really good at doing that because maybe they have like an internal instinctual grasp of like how to that structure's already there, maybe.
Sure.
I just like struggled with that. And I think like just examining some of these like basic foundations of like how we tell stories culturally and how we've like always told stories helped me look at it in a new way and like think about, okay, well, how do I make sure that, it goes like where I want to go next so I don't get stuck, because my goal, I think, with writing or like my process, how I would prefer it to be is that I can always just like get that first draft done. Cause then once I have that, then I can do like all of the fun stuff that I really like. Like my favorite thing, like I love writing, but I also just find it a little bit more of like a relief to be like, okay, well now I can just like edit and play and like, tinker and do all of those kinds of things, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, I'm gonna go to another question here.
Okay.
So I recently came across like a post you made on Facebook linking to your Patreon account, and it said something like, "Is my writing career just an expensive hobby?" And this post racked up a ton of likes and also comments from people discussing the value of contemporary literature in lieu of the fact that there's often little to no financial incentive for authors to write books in the 2020s, especially in indie literature. And I know you put your thoughts behind a Patreon paywall, but I was hoping you'd be open to at least talking a little bit about this with me. I have no idea the financials behind what you do, and you don't have to totally discuss that. But I know for me, like the first couple of my books maybe made me a couple $100 each. My last one was on like the most indie press I've been with, which was helpful in a lot of ways, but is all super small print runs. The cost was through the roof. Like there was no profit margin. I made $0 despite selling out several print runs. So I don't know where you're coming from, but I'm curious, even if you don't want to divulge the actual financial aspects. I mean, I'm guessing it's not very much. And so what do you think is the value of doing this? Or yeah, I don't know. Go for it.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's hard because, like, on one hand, I mean, part of it is like I have so much self-doubt and like I guess what you call like imposter syndrome that I just grapple with. I even like cried about it today. I was like literally like a couple hours ago, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? You know what I mean? Not like writing, but like I'm doing this like doctorate now and I'm like not an academic and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, is this the right thing? Like, am I just gonna fail and all that stuff? But with writing, it's like, I don't know. The value of writing in a novel, like for me, fundamentally is not financial because it's like art. I feel like art has a higher value. It's frustrating, but it should be like maybe realistic that like a book is a unique kind of art because it can also be like a commodity, you know? Like it can be like a mass-produced commodity that people
Mhm.
purchase. And it's even like treated like that now on like book talk and all this stuff. And like people purchase books not just for reading, but for aesthetics. And sometimes there's even like, I think, complex consumer mechanisms going on where I once, I don't remember where I heard this, but I once read someone who said, like, when you're buying books and you have this TBR pile that you just can't get through, what you're buying when you buy that book is the illusion of time. Like, you think that you will have time to do this and luxuriate in reading. And I was like,
Interesting.
yeah, and so that puts the book at this like interesting like, Venn diagram between like art and money. So that's like frustrating, but I do think like writing for me, like when I am working on a novel, fundamentally, and maybe the older and closer to death I get, I feel like it's more of like a spiritual mechanism for me. Like I feel more like it is my job, like my like duty to myself to sit down like in front of this blank thing, and work out whatever it is that's going on that I'm trying to like work out, whatever that is, even if it's a piece of like complete fantastical fiction that maybe has nothing to do like with my life. I'm still like working something out in my mind, and that feels like almost like a religious thing in some way, you know?
Sure.
And like I'm driven to do that. And so for that, like that itself for me, and like forcing myself to have the time to do that, even if I'm like working a full-time job or doing like various other things to like get, different income streams or whatever, still setting the time aside to do that is like, that is also part of that ritual of like making time for that like space. So that's like that for me is like the true value of it. It's just frustrating to be like, yeah, it's really hard to like make a living wage doing this. Like my last advance for Deliver Me is probably the cost of like maybe 1 month of living like in Los Angeles, like the rent and groceries and everything else, everything else you have to pay for. That's probably like that's like it. Um, and it can be hard sometimes to think about like the entire industry of people who make like living wages off of that. You know what I mean? Um, but I do still have this sense of like with like managing it all, or for example, like wanting to teach, writing or like live in literature. I do have that sense of being like, can I make a full-time income doing that? Is it like selfish and childish to think whether or not I could, Like maybe I'll never live off an advance, but I could like teach a lot and like work with other writers and stuff, and like maybe I could make it and have those different things, you know what I mean? Those different kinds of things.
I feel like that seems pretty common. Did you mention just a little bit ago that you're doing a doctorate right now?
Yeah, I'm doing a
That's
doctorate.
awesome. Congratulations, by the way. But when I delve into even like fairly successful authors, I feel like a lot of them are teaching to make a living, right? And I talked to Chelsea Hodson a couple months ago and was pretty impressed with like how she's gone about this. It seems like using similar tactics to what you're doing, other than she recently started her own press, and I have no idea what the financials are behind that. Like to me, I've kind of separated a lot of my career from this sort of book thing, though it's not like I don't have, I guess, like some tangible goals around that, around writing, but I don't know that it could surpass like the other part of my life in terms of like making money. I don't think I write fast enough for one.
Mhm.
But even if I did, I don't know. But I'm also thinking a lot lately about like, I don't know. I don't know if Philip Best, who runs my last press, amphetamine sulfate, would think kindly of me saying this, but in a certain way, I feel like there is a value of people who run a press like that, where it's almost designed in a way in which it's impossible to turn a profit, and yet I think there's a value to those people creating kind of like a space where cultural ideas can come into the world that might not have an avenue otherwise. Like all the people writing on amphetamine sulfate like aren't really commercial writers, or they might have a potential to be, who knows, we'll see. But at least within the past several years that press came to fruition. So I think that's really interesting. And I think it's probably similar to like how like an underground punk or hardcore label operates. Like usually there's like a couple of acts that end up exploding and like that funds the rest of it. But then you get all this kind of really interesting music, or in this case, literature that just wouldn't make it into the world, and certainly not in a way that anyone would give a shit. I think like having someone spearhead that who has a little bit of clout from whatever they did, like his music project back in the day, White House and Consumer Electronics, there's like a built-in audience who may then end up checking out work like mine. And I think I felt fortunate enough to just gain an audience who understood what I was doing. Because prior to that, it was all like, in my case, like fucking idiot porn fans who I had no context for literature necessarily. Not all of them, and I shouldn't be that fucking mean about it. Like everyone watches porn, it's whatever. But like they weren't there for the writing necessarily.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. No.
anyway, but I think that's interesting what you were talking about with your TBR list as like the illusion of time, or even some of this other stuff. I don't know. So do you have plan? I mean, you do in a way teach already, right? I mean, even if it's not in like an academic context, you are offering consultations and you edit and a bunch of other things, right?
Yeah. I edit like manuscripts and work one-on-one with authors. And I think one of my favorite things is like one-on-one work. Just because I feel like it's like hard to structure like, my thoughts about writing, or like what I'm trying to help people with, like what I'm trying to like help them meet their work, like where it's at and stuff. So it's like so much easier than like trying to create like the idea of like creating like a lecture where I just talk for like an hour is honestly terrifying. But I would like to learn, like I kind of do want to like challenge myself to like see if I can think about literature like in that, in that way. And yeah, for me, like my goal with the doctorate is like if like I don't know if I could ever do like full-time like teaching or something, but if I can just like add this one more thing to like my like repertoire, then I could teach undergrad like in the UK, and that would just be something that can help bolster me while I'm like figuring it out. But like I was thinking too, I don't even necessarily think like writing full time, like living off of your books is like like the best for a writer, because I do feel like a writer should be in the world and like with people. And if you're just like kind of
Yeah.
sitting like at a desk like all the time, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I feel like nothing is more boring to me than opening a novel or like watching like a movie, right? And like you're opening the novel and the main character is trying to write a book. Like I just find like, you know what I mean? Like that's not why I'm coming to a book. Like I'm coming to a book to live a completely different world. You know what I mean? Or like, right, it's like a filmmaker like making a film about like a filmmaker, or something like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That
Like,
that stuff is often really fucking boring. I mean, even if the book may be good, I'm never gonna know because if you give me that as the description, I'm not gonna read it. So, um, interesting. Okay. Well, I have another question that is a little bit of a different direction, and I don't know. We don't have to discuss this for too long if you don't want, but so I went to one of your readings in Los Angeles this past fall and listened to a conversation you had with Kate Durbin. And she addressed the fact that your book, Deliver Me, takes place in the rural South of the United States and is entrenched in a culture of evangelical Christianity. And she posed one of her questions to you in a strange way, in my opinion. She seemed to suggest that growing up with Christianity in the 90s, particularly in the 90s in the United States, was an unusual experience you might shed some light on. Um, But the cultural movement of mainstream Christianity in the 90s was like a fucking behemoth, at least from my point of view. Like Billy Graham, the Christian televangelist, was having like massive stadium tours called Crusades. It was like DC Talk on mainstream radio, and they were selling out arenas. And just a lot of millennials who I think you're in that age group. I've met have the experience of growing up with this as like a cultural phenomenon. At the same time, most people I interact with, like in an urban environment, certainly in Los Angeles, tend to take for granted that everyone is either an atheist or subscribes to some sort of alternative spirituality. And Kate certainly echoed this at your reading, though she also pointed out that your portrayal of Christianity in Deliver Me wasn't dismissive nor altogether negative. And I agree with her in that I appreciate your nuanced take on the topic. It seemed more or less like a description of the environment where your book takes place. So I was hoping you might shed some light on your decision to portray Christianity in a relatively neutral way, especially since you know you run a magazine called Witchcraft. And I don't know. I'm just curious. That seems like a hot button topic for a lot of people I meet these days. And yet like I kind of really appreciated that neutral tone. I mean, there's some just, you know, negativity around it, like with the mother character, but overall it just seemed to be like the space.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, so I guess one aspect of that is that I do feel like when I'm writing, the one consistent thing I think I'm trying to do is I do try to write without judgment, like in not in the sense that like I'm not judging them, but I kind of just I don't want to like spoon feed any feelings or sense of what people should think about something to the reader. I do like to just try to present something the like any like the way that I can so the reader can kind of decide for themselves how they feel about it in a way. So that's like one aspect. And I guess the other aspect of that, well, first it's funny, I never thought of it as neutral. But like I guess I've always been not always, but like been interested in religion for like a long time. Like the nuances of the different sects of Christianity are really fascinating to me because it causes like so much conflict. And it's kind of funny to see the different ways that people like will interpret, you know, these like texts, which have been like manipulated and changed over time and have been in like, you know, translated through like all these different languages, and even like different translations from like the original Aramaic of the Bible have like different specific words that can completely change, you know, like the meaning of a single line of text. Which then could fundamentally change the way that like, you know, an entire group of people decide to worship. It's just like insane. You know, and it's like the intensity of spiritual devotion that way is just fascinating to me. I feel like it shows me, even with like different religions, that this propensity towards some kind of worship or the desire for devotion is kind of like a natural, like emergent trait, you know, like in human consciousness. And I don't know why that is. Like, I don't like even investigating in myself, like I just don't have like a fundamental answer for those kinds of things. But I find them like interesting. And there's certain aspects, you know, like ritual or like meditation or certain kinds of prayer, like, you know, Orthodox liturgy. These things are really like the way that my consciousness interacts with those things are just like curious and almost like elevational, like, you know. And I don't know why. And I'm not like a monotheist or anything like that, but I'm just like, well, it's there and it fascinates me. So maybe like that's part of why, like, I just feel like I am always investigating these different aspects of religion. And even like for the novel, I did like do research. Like I went to like a oneness doctrine, like a Pentecostal church, very tiny church, like serves like 10 families in the area. You know, extremely like a little bit scary going in, being like a woman who has facial piercings and like wears trousers, you know, and like black eyeliner. But like going in, it's like I don't believe in God. And I would even say sometimes I'm hostile to Western Christianity. But when they're playing those organs and when these people start speaking in tongues and stuff, there's something that grips inside my chest that's like, whoa, like there's just energy going on. And it's a
Sure.
weird, yeah, it's a really weird thing that just happens to like the human mind or something, whether it's terror or something more, you know?
Fair enough. Well, I was just curious. I'm not going to go into it too much, but I'm more open to dabbling in a variety of things these days. I feel like just in like urban leftist environments, I feel like sort of like tarot or politics has kind of like taken the place of that. But I don't know, none of that shit seems to do it for me. So I'm just curious what people are thinking about these days. But anyway, we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to ask if you want to talk about anything else coming up or that we should know about what you're doing. Or I mean, people should definitely go buy Deliver Me if they haven't already. I think it's a fucking amazing book, and I'm glad that I got a chance to read it.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, I think that came out like very recently, so I think it's kind of stupid to be like, what do you have coming up next? But if you want to promote anything else, go for it.
Yeah, what am I doing? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with books right now. I've had like 3 book crises in the last like 2 months. But I am working on a workshop it's like for Ride or Die right now called Fuck, Marry, Kill, because I kind of want to delve into this idea of like female rage and the psychology of killing through like a lens of literature and stuff. So I'm working on like the lectures for that, which is cool. I think that's gonna happen in May.
Is
Like what
that
else?
a live thing, or is that something you're going to be doing via the internet, or what?
I think that Ride or Die is like kind of doing it via their Substack.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm working on that. And I'm really just, yeah, I'm not doing anything. I'm reading a lot right now, and I'm trying to, um, just like sometimes I wish I could just like clear my mind the way like there was this tweet that went viral recently on Twitter about like it was a Reddit post about this woman who just like lives in like a white walled apartment with like no windows and no art on the walls, 15 books from like the, undergrad like regimented books, doesn't watch movies, doesn't watch TV, like she just has I was like she just has this clean mind. And sometimes I'm just like I just want to do that for like 3 to 5 months and then come out of it, and then write my book or something.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I
Yeah.
also have dreams similar to something like that. This is a real thing, or this is just some sort of like Twitter.
This was like this guy was writing with his girlfriend and he was like, I think he was like, should I be concerned or not or something? But I was like, no, I want to do that. I want to just like that was like who she was as a person. But that's why I was like, that sounds ideal. Like I want to like cleanse my mind of like just all this shit that's trying to grab my attention all the time and then come out clean and new and then write, you know, 50,000 perfect words or something like that. That's like my goal right now.
Can I just ask, what is do you have like a daily practice, or is this more of a like when I have time, or do you do it like all at once and then take a break, or how do you go about writing one of these books? Maybe it
So
changes between them.
yeah, so for a while I was like writing every single day, but since I moved to Scotland, it's kind of like changed and gone back and forth where I'll write a bunch and then I'll stop and then I'll write a bunch and then I'll stop. Like over like between the beginning of December and then like mid-January, I wrote like 38,000 words, but I think it's all like shit. I don't know what I'm doing with it. It's like it was stream of consciousness, like it wasn't planned, and so then I tried to make a plan, and then I was like my supervisor, which I have like mixed feelings on right now, was like when I was explaining the plot to her, because she's more commercial, she was like, well, what actually happens? And I was like, I don't fucking know. So now I'm like, what, like maybe I will try to plot it. Like, I just don't, I'm like, just like kind of flailing, right now. But I am just like reading. Like I'm just trying to read like a lot and not let these like outside voices like get to
What are you
me.
reading? Or what do
Um,
you recommend that you're reading?
I am reading, what am I reading right now? I'm reading Poor Things this month for Goth Book Club. Um, because he's a Glaswegian writer. I have to talk about that.
Okay.
Um, like a truly incredible Glaswegian writer. The movie was like transcendent to me. And it's been really cool to like live in the city that the author like is from and has had like an intense impact here and to see all these conversations happening like around.
Wait, who is it? The
The
author?
author the author is Alistair Gray.
Oh, Chris Kelso gave me one of his books. I was
Yeah.
completely unfamiliar. Uh, which book are you reading?
The book is Poor Things. Did he give
Oh,
you links?
that. Oh, okay. The fucking movie
Yeah.
that just came out, or
Yeah,
a few months ago, at least in the
yeah,
US. Okay,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's good. I started reading Lanark, which I loved, and then I was introduced to Gray by his book 1982 Janine, which takes place in like a single night. It's like this man who is essentially going to like commit suicide, and it's like this stream of consciousness. It's so good. Like it's just, and it's I feel it's transgressive, like it's raunchy and like fun, but also like has that like human element. Like it's not just shock for shock's sake. It's really good. You should read that. You would probably like 1982.
Okay. Yeah, paused in the middle of Lanark. Is that how you say it? Like there's
Yeah,
because there's a few like three books inside of it, and
yeah.
I think I hit the middle, and then I was like, this is. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I like it, but it's like, and I guess I actually really want to know what happens. It was fucking weird. They all like turn into dragons or whatever. But
Yeah, it's very
if I should
surreal.
get back to it, I always have like eight things I'm trying to read, and one of them drags my attention more than the others. But whatever. So
Yeah, that's me too. I'm about to start also this book called Silicone God by Victoria Brooks. Um, I don't actually remember what it's about, but it sounds dope as shit.
okay,
Silicone God,
okay.
like come on, like that's a cool fucking
It's a
title.
good title. I don't know what it's about, but it sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the fuck I'm reading. Oh, I recently finished a Gary Shipley book. It was my first one because I'm trying to, I don't know, I feel like being on a press is sometimes like being on a football team and I need to like rep the people on there. So I'm trying to figure out like who else is on Apocalypse Party. And it's fucking really good. I think it's Everything is Elastic and Beautiful. Is that the title? Something like
Yeah, yeah. I want to read that. Do you like it?
Yeah, the first few chapters, I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" I was like, "I don't know if I can get into this," but then it becomes a lot easier to read. I think with it about like 30 pages in. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was
Some people
like,
like that more experimental style, and I guess you could say some of my stuff is in that wheelhouse. But honestly, I really appreciate when you just wrote like a fucking novel. I was like, I like that. Uh,
thank you. It's really
Sorry, what
funny.
were you gonna say? I think I cut you
Oh,
off.
I was just saying, I kind of like when like a book makes you earn it, when you're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It depends. Yeah, I mean, in this case, I definitely felt that way. I'm glad I stuck with it. And certainly, I think probably some of my favorite books are like that. It takes a while to get into, and then it's like, holy shit. But I don't know. I also like a lot of the stuff coming out these days from small presses that are like 100 pages, and I can just get through something really quick. So I don't know. It's all
I
all
need
of
that. It makes me feel accomplished.
well, we got less than a minute left. I don't know. I'll tag you and whatever when I post these up, so I think people will be able to find you. But any final words?
No, just thank you for having me on. This was really fun.
Likewise. Well, thanks for chatting with me. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.